AFCFTA is the economic engine of this vision, with institutions like AFREXIMBANK serving as a catalyst partner. Already, we are seeing signs of progress. Pilot trade shipments under AFCFTA's guided trade initiative have begun, and customs protocols are improving. Small and medium enterprises, especially those led by women and young people, are finding new markets across the continent. Intra-African trade has now surpassed 200 billion USD, thanks to, in part, AFREXIMBANK's Pan-African payment and settlement system. Enabling cross-border transactions, integration is not just an ideal, but a practical path to shared prosperity. Third, financing Africa's future with homegrown solutions. Africa cannot rise without inclusive and sovereign financing. For too long, external creditors imposed conditions that did not serve us. So Africa is charting a different path. Shows how homegrown financial solutions can work. It provides counter-cyclical loans during crisis, supports regional supply chains, and innovates with platforms like PAPS and MANSA. These efforts prove that Africa can find loses an estimated 89 billion every year to illicit financial outflows, money that should be building schools and improving healthcare. We must stop this hemorrhage through stronger governance and regional cooperation, and reforms to expand tax bases and curb illicit flows. We also have untapped pools of capital at home. African pensions funds collectively manage about 777 billion in assets. We should channel more of these domestic savings into African infrastructure and businesses. We also advocate for a fairer global financial system, a stronger Africa voice in the IMF and World Bank, and an end to biased credit rating that unfairly raise our borrowing costs. We are also putting in place our own rating agency. Fourth, harnessing youth power and diaspora strength. From Lagos to Los Angeles, African music and film are captivating the world. The influence is more than entertainment. It is soft power and economic opportunity, showing Africa's bold emergence on the world stage. To fully unlock the potential of our young population, we must invest in quality education, expand technical and vocational training, and ensure digital inclusion so every young African can access opportunities. The African Union is supporting these goals through initiatives like a revitalized AU Youth Volunteers Corps and new continent-wide programs for internship and job placements. Africa's diaspora is also a tremendous asset. Millions of Africans abroad send home over 100 billion in remittances each year and bring global expertise and networks. We must engage them as true partners in Africa's rise and co-creators of it. I urge our governments and banks to establish diaspora bonds and investment funds to channel diaspora wealth into African development. Our youth and diaspora are integral to our future, and their full inclusion is imperative. A continent divided cannot rise. Fifth, facing the climate crisis and demanding justice. Africa is on the front line of the climate crisis, despite contributing the least to it. Our people endure droughts, floods, and desertification. These are not just environmental issues, but existential threats to lives and economies in the continent. We must invest in low carbon energy for growth and build climate resilient infrastructure to protect our communities. At the same time, we must demand climate justice and hold wealthy nations accountable. They have pledged to increase climate finance for developing countries, aiming for 300 billion USD per year by 2035 and ultimately 1.3 trillion by that date. Africa will insist these promises are kept with timely and adequate support to confirm the climate emergency. We must shield African economies from other climate policies. Unilateral moves like carbon tariffs could hurt African exporters. We must ensure our industries can green their operations and remain competitive. Africa should not be penalized for embracing sustainability. We need support to adapt without sacrificing growth. Six, a united voice in a multipolar world. The world is no longer bipolar or unipolar. It is multipolar. And Africa must stand as a confident pole of influence. The inclusion of the African Union as but we must translate this achievement into real influence. Africa's 55 nations should speak with one voice in international forums, from climate summits to trade negotiations to United Nations debates. With over 1.4 billion people and a growing economy weight, Africa can move from the periphery of the decision making to its core through unity. Our collective strength will ensure that global decisions better reflect Africa's interests. Seventh, sustaining the rise, leadership, and unity. So can Africa rise in a fractured world? The truth is, Africa is already rising. We see it in our increasing intra-African trade, our financial innovations, and the creativity and determination of our people. We are rising because we choose cooperation over conflict, self-reliance over dependence, and unity over fragmentation. However, this progress is not automatic or guaranteed. Sustaining our rise requires accountable leadership, effective institutions, inclusive policies, and respectful partnerships. In short, it demands good governance and an unwavering commitment to include everyone in our growth. Africa's rise will not happen by accident. We will rise by design, by determination, and by collective action. And finally, rising by resilience and design. For too long, Africa's story has been framed by adversity. Yet, each challenge, from colonization to conflict, from pandemics to economic exclusion, has made us more resilient and more united. That resilience is the foundation of our future, and now is the time to build upon it. Today, on behalf of the African Union, I issue a clarion call to Africans everywhere. It is time for us to shape the future we want together. Unlock Africa's own capital and invest in our development. Finance transformative infrastructure across the continent. Invest in African entrepreneurs, especially youth and women. Digitize financial system to boost intra-African trade. Build a self-reliant continental economy. To our diaspora, your knowledge, networks, and resources are vital. We urge you to come home with your vision and expertise by partnering with African institutions. And here I would like to really welcome the second Africa CARICOM summit that will be held later this year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Together, let us shape Africa's destiny in line with Agenda 2063 so the next generations inherit a continent of prosperity and pride. Africa does not lack potential. In a fractured world, let Africans be each other's answer. United in purpose and conviction, Africa will not just rise, Africa will soar. Let us rise resilient, resourceful, and ready. Let us build the Africa we deserve. May Africa rise. May Africa unite. May Africa lead. Thank you. Merci, shukran, asante sana, obrigado. God bless Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Ambassador Selma Malaika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, representing the chairperson, of course, of the AUC. And also thank you to Georgia Lombi at AFREXIMBANK there for getting us off to a good start there. Now we're going to move over to the Caribbean, our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. Her Excellency Dr. Carla Barnett leads CARICOM. It's a 20-nation regional bloc advancing Caribbean economic integration, development, and global partnerships. Most recently, collaborating with AFREXIMBANK to boost trade, investment, and sustainability initiatives. Please welcome her to the stage as she delivers her remarks. Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General of CARICOM.
Good morning, everyone. I will stand on all of the protocols that have already been established and simply say that I am extremely pleased to be here today for the 32nd annual meeting of AFREXIMBANK and to reflect on the theme, Progressive Unity in a Fractured World, Building a Global African Coalition for Development. Thanks to AFREXIMBANK and thanks to the government of Nigeria for all of the courtesies that have been extended to my delegation since we have been here. It is really very much appreciated. The globalization phenomenon of the 21st century was expected to enhance North-South relations and the interdependence of people worldwide. It was also anticipated that it would bring prosperity in the developing world through increased efficiency of industries and competitiveness to drive growth and development. Instead, the world has devolved into what the World Economic Forum in its Global Risk Report 2025 has described as an increasingly fractured global landscape with escalating geopolitical, environmental, societal, and technological challenges. Amidst these challenges, Africa, with a significant demographic advantage, natural resource base, untapped carbon markets, and renewable energy, remains poised to become the next frontier of global economic growth. To realize this potential, Africa will not only need to harness its diversity, but also leverage its strategic assets to mitigate some of the geopolitical and geoeconomic risks emanating from an extremely polarized global environment. In this regard, the concept of progressive unity, characterized by prioritizing shared values, collective vision, dialogue, and collaborative action, must become the guiding principle for Africa's interactions on the global scale or global stage. Such interactions will require bold, strategic choices rooted in African agency, innovative policies, and strong global partnerships. In this fractured environment, This is an opportunity for Africa and the Caribbean, which is the home of a large contingent of the African diaspora, the sixth region, to build common cause on shared values and shared interests and forge a path towards mutually beneficial collective action. The divisions created during the period of European colonization of Africa and the Caribbean would remain and become even further entrenched without a focused intent on breaking down the barriers among us. Both regions have already started this journey to embrace a collective vision and to create a new model of collaboration in our mutual interests. Like the Caribbean, Africa's well being is inextricably linked to global prosperity. However, amidst trade tensions triggered by a rise in protectionist measures and growing policy uncertainty, global economic growth is now projected to slow down in 2025 and to remain tepid in the short to medium term. This has caused a significant downward revision in the growth outlook for almost all countries, including in Africa and in the Caribbean, thereby making progress on key development goals more difficult. More particularly, this prediction for global prosperity is accompanied by multiple shocks, such as the downturn in global demand, lower prices for some key commodities, higher global borrowing costs, and constraints on external funding. These have significant implications for the growth and development trajectory of developing countries. Of grave concern is the breakdown of the rules based international trading system, the disruption in trade and investment flows, and the increased decoupling of traditional trading partners from the current providers of development support. Developing countries like those in Africa and the Caribbean are the hardest hit, as heightened geopolitical tensions and reduced trade lead to a fall in foreign direct investment and the knowledge spillovers that are so critical to driving inclusive growth and sustainable development. These geopolitical and geoeconomic developments require careful handling. There needs to be positive alignment between economic and political interests and a redefinition of global partnerships into mechanisms that foster inclusive growth, sustainable development, and economic and climate resilience for developing countries. Building resilience requires that Africa, like the Caribbean, retain access to affordable, long term concessional financing from multilateral development institutions. The Bridgetown Initiative, version 3.0, provides a common platform for joint advocacy on the reform of the multilateral financial system, whose governance model continues to mirror outdated political alliances and economic constructs. More than anything else, this situation serves as a basis for a common cause between Africa and the Caribbean. While the current realignment of global geopolitical and geoeconomic interests will continue to pose significant challenges, it also creates opportunities for Africa and the Caribbean to strengthen cooperation to achieve common development goals. As I noted during the first CARICOM Africa Summit hosted by Kenya and held virtually in September of 2021, CARICOM is committed to strengthening this cooperation and building a mutually beneficial and stable partnership. Opportunities exist in such areas as trade and investment promotion, development finance, climate change, reparatory justice, mass media, and increased people to people contact. Moreover, a strong and mutually beneficial partnership between Africa and the Caribbean, underscored by the principle of progressive unity, can become the springboard for broader South cooperation that leverages comparative advantages, thereby creating strong economic growth and development trajectories. We look forward to exploring these possibilities during the second CARICOM Africa Summit to be held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, on CARICOM Africa Day on September 7th of this year. The foundations of African agency and the building of successful strategic partnerships have already been laid with the admission of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. This gives Africa an active voice on key development issues, key global economic issues. The establishment of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the world's largest free trade area that is intended to create a single market for goods and services on the continent, is a major step towards, among other things, reducing intra African trade barriers and developing African value chains and economic prosperity. This institutional platform, along with mutually beneficial partnerships and alliances, will advance the ecosystem for building a global African coalition for development, including the Caribbean. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Her Excellency, the CARICOM Secretary General, Dr. Carla Barnett. Now, the Dangote refinery is a true phenomenon. Deep into the Lekki Peninsula of Lagos State here in Nigeria, it's a real game changer. And AFREXIMBANK has been instrumental in realizing this juggernaut of progress, not just for Nigeria, but for the whole of Africa. It is really a blueprint on self-determination when it comes to energy, when it comes to refined energy. And Dangote is literally powering energy independence with this incredible structure. And we're very, very proud of it. It's creating thousands of jobs as well, and turning Nigeria from an importer to an exporter of refined products. It's a true game changer for regional prosperity and opportunity. Take a look at this video.
There are very few of Maji Dangote in the marketplace.
In an economy that wants to grow, you must have entrepreneurs that think big and dare.
Mr. Dangote, you are putting together one of the largest ever investments in Africa.
Aliko Dangote, most famous industrialist and investor in Africa.
My childhood life was great, really, because I was raised by my late grandfather, who was actually a businessman. Right from childhood, I had this interest of being or becoming a business. I've always wanted to work for myself, make things that people believe that they are impossible, make them possible.
I guess anybody who goes there will feel the same way. You can imagine that a 650,000 barrels per day refinery is huge. It's way beyond my own imagination.
Today, the refinery we are building is the largest ever single train in the world, not in Africa. Yes, 650,000 barrels.
That resonates with us, resonates with our founding principle, the can-do spirit of the African. We have to support the big idea of our brother Aliko. We are backing it because we believe that it will change things.
The world has changed completely. You don't produce value add, forget it. You don't get anything.
We must industrialize. And you can see that we already have an alignment with the Dangote Group.
There's nothing that is as good as a bank understanding your needs so that you don't have to talk much. They understood our own business. When we explained to them what we're doing, they encourage us quite a lot. They are our major funding partner today as we speak.
This project is unique from a lot of sense. We are producing a Euro 5, the highest level of standard that can be produced over here. Look at this piece of pipe. So this is the power plant area. So we see the shorter chimney is linked to the gas turbine, and then we have boilers and steam turbine on the other side. And that big building that you see over there is the main substation. It's basically where the main power goes, and from there, feeding all the substation for each of the units.
Whenever the president comes here, he's always very happy to see the kind of development that we do. But he tells me, he says, Captain, I mean, this development is development that I know that you can do. But he says, what will really give me great happiness is that before you decide to leave Nigeria and go, you give me 7 captains like me. And I want all 7 of them to be Nigerian. So he is more interested in us creating a leadership talent pipeline.
What we are doing at the moment is ensure that the refinery is built to the standard that it should be built to. We are trying to ensure that there are no mistakes in the piping, that no valves is missing, no nuts or bolts or whatever. So that's what we try to ensure every single day.
The whole thing is not about you amassing wealth. It's about you adding value to society. It's one of the things that when you ask me when I go to bed, what do I see? So this is the kind of picture that I have of the Africa of my dream.
We need to groom people not to be afraid. Yes. We need to groom people to understand what they're trying to do. We need to have people who have a vision. AFREXIMBANK is walking the talk of transforming Africa.
If you had come 10 years back and you had said that a gentleman by the name of Mr. Dangote is going to build a 650,000 multi-billion project in Nigeria on barren land, we would have just laughed at you because it has never been done on the African continent. Now that the project is completed, I hope that this will be an example to many other entrepreneurs, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent, that anything is possible.
What an amazing video. À présent, mesdames et messieurs, une conversation très spéciale qui incarne à la fois les défis de notre temps et les immenses possibilités de l'Afrique. Face à vous, dans quelques instants, sur cette scène, assis sur ce fauteuil, se trouvera un homme dont le nom résonne bien au-delà des frontières du continent. Alhaji Aliko Dangote, un visionnaire. Vous pouvez l'applaudir si vous le souhaitez. Un visionnaire industriel, un bâtisseur d'empire et surtout un infatigable croyant en la destinée africaine. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome a man whose name is not only known, it is deeply respected. He's a builder, a visionary, a source of inspiration. His journey isn't just a success story, it's a blueprint for what economic sovereignty can look like across our continent. So today he will share with us his insight on the path to making Africa great again. And guiding this pivotal discussion, please welcome Eleni Jokos, CNN's foremost voice on Africa's economic landscape. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. Please welcome Alhaji Aliko Dangote. Fantastic to be in Nigeria. Always have a good time.
Thank you.
Yes,
Always
and
great to be here.
and every time I see you, there's more happening, and you are revolutionizing so many things across the value chain. But I want to quickly start with our topic. The path to making Africa great again. And funny enough, it's the same acronym as America, right? MAGA?
Yes.
Which is
Make America.
yeah, exactly. So make Africa great again. But when you hear that, what is the first thing, Alhaji, that comes to mind in terms of the path to making that happen? It's about industrialization. It's about local procurement. It's about value chains. But how do we do it?
Well, the only way our minerals before they are exported so that we can actually create jobs. Because the issue is that once we remain a dumping ground, we will never be able to create jobs. And, I'm of the believer that once you continue to import, you are importing poverty and exporting jobs out. So the real issue for us is that now President Trump are great, or America first. So since it's the create jobs, the real reason why we have actually not flown as much as Asia, Asians, they have quite a lot of old entrepreneurs, old money, and majority of them, they believe in their own continent, be it from Thailand, Indonesia, and other areas. So most of them, they invest their money at home. Both people who have made money legally, people who have made money illegally, the money doesn't leave the countries. They invest it there.
So you're saying that's what we're lacking in Africa,
Yeah,
right?
well, in Africa, the issue is that, yes, some people, they do make money legally. Some of them, they make their own money illegally. But majority of people, they take the money out of the continent. So if I'm not investing at home, how do I convince somebody to come and partner with me and invest and make Africa great? It's difficult.
So let's look at the President Trump model. So America first, the tariffs, the confrontation, wanting to reindustrialize America. I mean, it's created so much debate and actually what we call global trade war. But it's really interesting to look at the dynamics of this because to industrialize, you've got to take tough decisions. Is there anything that America is doing right now where you're saying, you know what, that would work for the African context to ensure that we see more industrialization? Do you think that tariffs would work?
Well, you see, the issue is that, let me explain something to you that you need to know. When Trump always say, okay, fine, make America great, what he's trying to do is actually trying to create jobs. Some people might not agree with me, but I fully agree with him because I've been through that route where now we try to do industries and they keep saying that, no, 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 open up your market. When you open up your market, it's like you now going to bed, you open up your windows, you go to bed, you are not going to be, you won't be able to have a good sleep because you'll be disturbed by mosquitoes. so when you now say you open up this thing, you don't have what it takes to allow every single down thing to be dumped into your own market. That's what you call a fair competition. That's also what you call dumping. Okay, because if I have excess, I will take it at half price to go and dump in somebody's market. So I make sure that the country does not produce what they need.
What I find fascinating with what you're saying, because one way that people are describing things, it's like becoming a lot more protectionist, which is bad. But actually, the way you're saying it is that we should be a dumping ground, and there's a distinction.
Let me give you an example.
Between the two things.
Let me give you an example. He has done quite more than that. People maybe know about the steel, aluminium, where he ended off, he tried 25% tariff. And then later on, he said, no, 50%. If he doesn't do that, American steel industry will shut down.
It's true.
There are two things that don't allow industries to thrive, especially in Africa. There are two things. One is lack of electricity. Second is inconsistencies in government policies.
So let's talk about the policies that need to change. And I actually go back to the way your cement business flourished. And then President Obasanjo took, I think, what many people consider as a bold decision. And it wasn't just a tariff on imported cement at the time. It was quite interesting because it was about backward integration if you do import.
That's right.
So, and I really want to unpack that because I wonder if you can scale that idea across other sectors and whether that's workable as a policy.
Well, as a policy, what President Obasanjo did was actually, great. I mean, Obasanjo at that time when he was president, I think maybe sleeps about 2, 3 hours. He called me 4:30 in the morning and asked me that, hey, look, Nigeria now is about number 2 in import of cement in the world after US. I'm not going to allow that to continue. How do we address this issue? I said, okay, fine. Let me, Mr. President, remove my Dangote cap and put Nigeria's cap, and I will tell you what to do. Maybe why don't you say, okay, let's go and do backward integration. If you don't set up a factory, you cannot import. So all of us, we now run to set up industries. I know that our bankers were very small at that time, and but we went very aggressive. Nigeria was producing totally 1.9 million tons, and we started building a plant of 5 million tons at the same time. But all our bankers were very, very supportive, and we carry on with that. But fast forward, what's the benefit of that policy is that today you don't have to import cement, you can buy cement. Nigeria from 2007 to date, Nigeria produces more than 60 million tons of cement.
And is the largest exporter.
And now also Nigeria is the largest exporter of cement in Africa. Thirdly, as we speak, when we finish our Itori factory, it's 100% for export, and Nigeria will not earn less than $500 million of just exporting cement.
Brilliant. Let's focus to the refinery because you're exporting jet fuel to the United States, correct?
Not only to Asia,
but to Asia as well.
Asia,
It's such a
United
feat.
States.
Nigeria is exporting jet fuel to these major economies and fertilizer to the United States.
Yes, actually, 37% of our fertilizer goes to US.
I mean, that's incredible to think about because it shows what actually can be done. And, you know, this was a mammoth project. We've spoken about how a Herculean task it was for you. And I wonder how it's going from an economics perspective, financial perspective, and whether looking back now, because it's always every single year, there's more hindsight. Was it completely worth it? Would you do it again? What's your answer this time round?
Well, I think I will do other things again. But like what I said, when we launched the refinery project, luckily for us, we actually didn't have a full idea of what we are doing. If we knew what we are going to go through, we wouldn't have tried it. But it's good that we didn't know. So that's why. So at least we've been able to, deliver. But it was really tasking, humongous, and I must say that without the support of our bankers, led by AFREXIMBANK, the Access, Zenith, First Bank, it wouldn't have been possible at all.
So, let me ask you this: what's your biggest challenge that you face right now? You know, buying of crude in Nigeria, selling off takers. What is your biggest issue, and how does that speak to pushing African champions locally? Whether you felt that you've had that support, I want you to give me a sense of what that experience is right now.
Well, the issue is that we African champions, we need to understand that we are the only people that can make Africa great.
Yeah.
Nobody will do that for us. So as such, we need to make sure that we concentrate, we believe in our own continent. Of course, there will be ups and downs here and there, but life is all about up and downs, and sometimes, yes, you succeed, sometimes you don't. But majority of us, once you concentrate, you really know what you are doing, you'll be successful. It's difficult, and you don't really expect anybody to hail you. People who made America great, it is only now that people are hailing them. But at the time when they were really pushing, trying to create all the Vanderbilts, the Ford and Co., nobody was hailing them at that time. So it is very difficult. for people to hail you while you are doing things. But on hindsight, when you look at it, people will not appreciate. You see, the job of people like us is is not about really amassing wealth. It is about creating wealth.
Yeah.
How do you create wealth? You create jobs, you make sure that you expand the economy. Other investors will see what you are doing and they will also join. Like what I keep saying, majority of our own countries, especially in Africa, they keep going around to look for foreign investors. Foreign investors, they just don't come that easy. So what you need to do is to encourage domestic investors. When they are doing well, that is the invitation for international investors.
I want to talk about the global geopolitical upheaval. I'm trying to think of a diplomatic word that, describes what we're seeing globally. And it feels in many ways the African continent, African countries are stuck in the middle of sort of this to and fro of the spheres of influence that are shifting dramatically. The United States wants to ban many African countries from visas and travel. It hasn't been implemented and instituted, but there's a threat. And Nigeria is on that list. Angola just hosted the US Africa Summit, and Angola is also on the list. And I just wonder what it means for you as an African industrialist looking at the United States lack of focus on the continent and also, frankly, the policy, which is mind boggling in so many ways. What do you think?
Well, if you look at it today, why do you want to bother going to the US? I mean, you should,
the US should want to come to Africa because we've got the resources,
yeah, of course,
right?
You should remain at home. We have 60% of the world's arable land.
Yeah.
Agriculture is not cheap. Okay, we have all the mineral sources from gold, lithium, diamonds, everything. We have it here. So all what you need to do is to start giving conditions to people. Don't come and take my cocoa and process over there, and you come now and sell the chocolate to me 20 times the cost of that chocolate. So let us make our continent a productive continent. We're the only continent that has actually have growth. If you look at it today, Europe, with respect to them, there's no growth in Europe.
Yeah.
They've reached a certain distance. So they need Africa to grow.
Do you think that that's a good partner for the continent, the Europeans? I think it's China. Is it Russia? Is it Saudi and the UAE? They've got, who's the best partner for the continent right now? Because whether we like it or not, and frankly, there's always been a scramble for Africa's resources. Who's going to capture that part of, getting as many commodities as possible so that they can process locally? The mind shift in Africa is changing, but you still have a scramble, and you can feel it. It is evident in terms of influence. So who's the best partner?
I think now we have a couple of players, but the main Maradona in the field is AFREXIMBANK. If we can have 10 institutions like AFREXIMBANK, it will be totally a different story. Totally a different story. We can actually turn Africa into a heaven in the next 5 years. It doesn't take time.
So how?
Because like what I keep saying, you need to think big, then you grow big. You think small, you never grow.
Okay, but the reality is, right now we're still relying on foreign partners to create more AFREXIMBANKs. Is going
doing in Africa, taking the money out of the continent, out of their Asian region.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not saying that I encourage. All what I'm saying is that there's no society, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, everywhere that you think of, there is corruption. But our own is totally different, where now you deprive your country of the money, you deprive your family of the money because you won't tell your family you've stolen money. So, you deprive everybody, then you now go and hide the money somewhere. When you die, the money will go into the banking system.
This is brilliant. I mean, I've never thought of
But
corruption in
I
this way.
mean, to tell you the truth, okay, like now, somebody was asking me a question. I think some people came to visit our own fertilizer, and I was telling them that, I've said it before in one forum that in the next 40 months, Africa will not import fertilizer from anywhere. We have a very aggressive trajectory right now. We want to put Dangote fertilizer to be the largest producer of fertilizer of urea, bigger and higher than Qatar. And watch me, 40 months. Give me 40 months.
We'll be back on stage discussing that. Okay.
We'll
I
be
was
back on
speaking.
stage.
The AFCFTA Secretary General Wamkele Mene was telling me the trade finance deficit is as big as the infrastructure deficit that the continent is facing, and we need to tap into that money. So where's it going to come from? I mean, you solved part of this with the corruption. We should be reinvesting. I like that. I don't know how much of a gap that's going to fill, but trade finance is a big issue. Does that worry you?
It doesn't really worry me. That's what I keep talking about. This is not because really I'm here attending AFREXIMBANK's something. Because when you look at the vision and also the mission of AFREXIMBANK is to connect all these dots. The trade financing is there. They are not the only ones. There is also Africa Finance Corporation. There are other banks. Once they build, if they are going to raise capital, believe me honestly, today, even if I'm not going to make money, I would rather invest in banks that have the same vision like AFREXIMBANK, because that's the only way that we can develop our continent. I mean, forget about most of these other banks. Their interest is not for Africa to grow. We must make sure we take it as our own focus, as our vision that, look, how do we make Africa great? Africa can only be made great by Africans.
Can I ask you this? With all this narrative that we're seeing out of the US, and if African leaders truly adopt this, let's make Africa great. Let's Africa first. We know that you don't want us to grow, but actually, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to sign bad deals anymore. We're not going to accept extraction without actually some kind of processing on the continent. If there's a mind shift change, do you think there'll be global pushback towards the continent? Because there's one thing that's always been certain: the hypocrisy and the way that the African continent, African leaders have been treated, unfortunately, is still pretty much the same. And that's very worrying.
When we start insisting on our minerals to be processed in our continent, you see the rush. Everybody rushed to come down here. Don't take our mineral sources, process them here, create value, generate jobs and growth. And it can happen.
I've got another question. Your refinery, and we were talking backstage about this, and you're doing something very revolutionary that no one's ever done before. And I want you to explain how you're thinking about the supply chain and how it's going to shake things up in Nigeria.
Well, okay, the supply chain, our oil industry here, especially the downstream, has been a mesh with so much of corruption, lack of investment in terms of distribution, and also people are still grappling with other issues. So we came up with something where we are saying that, yes, you pay for your product, aviation fuel, gasoline, which is, PMS, and diesel. All the telecom companies, the industries, and we're saying, give us a location all over Nigeria, even up to 3,000 kilometers will deliver to you zero charge. And somebody said, but do you know what it is? I say, yes, we have an idea. I think we're actually pumping back into the economy almost about 1.2 trillion naira. And that's what we are doing. They say it's competition. So we're asking other people to please also come and compete with us.
I don't know if they can. You're also planning to list? Give us the fertilizer business end of the year?
We're going to list the fertilizer this year, and next year I think we'll list the refinery. It is very important for us to list the refinery so that people will not be calling us monopoly. They will now say, yes, we own part of it. So let everybody have shares.
Alhaji Aliko Dangote, sir, thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for this incredible industrialist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Powering Africa's energy independence. Let's hear it again for Aliko Dangote. Now, I gave a roll call at the beginning of the day, and it was probably one of the longest I've ever had because there are so many dignitaries, so many sitting presidents who are here, prime ministers, former presidents, former prime ministers. I'm not going to do that again, but as I spot people, I'm going to give a shout out. So I want you to give a warm round of applause for the former Senate President of Nigeria, His Excellency Bukola Saraki, sitting there. And also, you know, we've just heard from a titan, a force of nature when it comes to the industry and the real game changer. We don't just have one Nigerian force of nature. I see Mr. Tony Elumelu sitting over there as well. Now, let's move on with the program because there's a lot more to come. This is a very rich program. Now, we all know that the global financial architecture gives Africa a raw deal, yeah? And that besides a long overdue overhaul, we need to think of innovative ways to unlock domestic capital, as you heard, but also foreign capital, which is getting harder and harder to find. So, I'm delighted to go to New York now and bring in Professor Jeffrey Sachs, the world-renowned economist and director of Columbia University's Center for Sustainable Development, to deliver his keynote on African multilateral financial institutions in the emerging New World Order. Let's see if we can see Professor Sachs. Can you hear us? Abuja calling, AAM 20.
I hear.
Yeah, there you go.
Hear you well. Can you
Jeffrey
hear me?
Sachs there, ladies and gentlemen.
Greetings.
Okay, Professor. This is one of my favorite parts of the program. What we're going to do is I'm going to hand over the floor to you to give us some of your thoughts, and then I'm going to invite a couple of panelists to have a deep dive. Take it away, Professor. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Warm greetings to everybody. I've been listening intently to the fantastic discussion of the last couple of days. It's very impressive, and it's very clear that the mood is very positive. And I share that sentiment completely. I believe that the next decades are Africa's turn for supercharged economic growth. You know, I often make the comparison because I think it's real. There are 3 places in the world today with 1.5 billion people: China, India, and Africa. China began its supercharged economic growth in 1980. And between 1980 and 2020, China averaged nearly 10% per year economic growth. China was a very poor country in 1980. By some measures, 70% or higher in extreme poverty. By 2020, extreme poverty was 0. And that's not just propaganda, that's the reality. I've been to the poorest counties of China. They're not poor anymore, believe me. When an economy grows at 10% per year, it doubles every 7 years. Since China did that for 40 years, that means that it had more than 5 doublings. And more than 5 doublings means a more than a 32-time increase of the Chinese economy. Now, roughly 15 to 20 years later, India began its period of rapid development. It lagged behind China, in part because the reform process in India started later. The opening to the world economy, and here I want to stress that both China and India grew rapidly by exporting rapidly to the world. India began its rapid growth around the year 2000. It's been at it for 25 years. India is the fastest growing large economy in the world today, growing faster even than China, because as China's become richer, the growth has gradually declined. India is now growing reliably at 6 to 7% per year. When you grow at 7% per year, the doubling period is a decade. If you do that for 3 decades in a row, the economy doubles 3 times or is an 8-fold higher 30 years later. Now, in my view, the next period of rapid growth is Africa's turn. Not that India will suddenly slow down, or China. Both will continue to grow rapidly, as will other parts of Asia. But I think Africa can be and should be the premier growth of the world economy from now until the goal of 2063, the 100th anniversary of African unity. All of the vision of Africa as a high-income continent is completely achievable, in my view, between now and 2063. Indeed, I think that's the course that Africa will achieve. Now, what is the basis for that? We've already heard from several of the speakers, and I was enjoying listening to Mr. Dangote enormously just now, that the key is investment. The key is to raise the rates of investment on the continent from roughly 20 to 25% of the income to around 40% of the income. Rapid growth means a supercharged investment rate. And the key is investment in 3 complementary areas. And this is very important because 2 of the 3 areas have a big role for government. The third role has a big role for Mr. Dangote and his colleagues, the business sector. But the first area of investment that is the gold mine for Africa is investment in education. There is no higher return for Africa or for any country than investing in its children and getting them a quality education, at least through upper secondary completion, and now with a significant proportion going on for some kind of advanced training. Currently, Africa graduates roughly 30% of its young people in upper secondary. That should become 100% in the coming few years. In other words, keep the kids in school, bolster the education, create the skilled workforce, create the entrepreneurial capacities of all of these young people, and Africa will have it made. Believe me, this is the most important single investment, and it is core to China's success, which had an astounding rise of educational quality and completion, and a core part of India's success. So the first area of investment is in education. The second area of investment is in infrastructure. As Mr. Dangote just said, certainly electricity for everybody, certainly digital access for everybody, certainly transport facilities for everybody. And that is practical, affordable, investment, but it means a lot of investment in the coming 2 decades. It means a lot of construction, which is going to be using Mr. Dangote's cement, because construction will be a boom sector across Africa as Africa is building its physical infrastructure, building its cities, which are continuing to expand at an enormous rate because Africa is urbanizing, of course, very rapidly as well. So power is crucial. The power sector, the digital connectivity, the road network, the rail connections, the ports, the airports, the urban infrastructure. This is a major part of the investment scene. The third area of investment, of course, is the business sector. It's the private economy. And that is where the private entrepreneurs have, of course, the overwhelming responsibility. But there's no doubt a tremendous burst of entrepreneurship across Africa. If the skilled work is there and if the physical infrastructure is in place, then Africa will achieve a boom in the private sector as well. Of course, the private sector needs to be supported by smart industrial policies. No doubt that is part of the make any region great strategy is industrial policy. China has boomed on the basis of Made in China 2025, a China policy to upgrade technologies to world leadership standards over the 10-year period from 2015 to 2025. And Africa needs a Made in Africa strategy 2035, looking ahead the next 10 years. By the way, I was so moved and impressed with the talk of the deputy chair of the African Union, Salma Malika Haddadi. It was perfect. Absolutely exactly on track. For all of this high rate of investment to occur, this needs to be a continental-wide effort, not 55 separate times, although every one of the 55 countries of Africa needs to take initiatives. But the African Union and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area should make this a unified effort. Infrastructure should cross national borders. Power grids should cross national borders. Highways and rail should cross national borders. This should be intrinsic. Your planning ministers should be meeting with their neighbors, something that doesn't happen very much. They meet more in Washington than with their own neighbors. And the truth is, Washington doesn't have a role in this. This is absolutely true. This is an Africa initiative, and this is where the partnerships to establish a true African continental free trade area are essential. Now, all of this requires financing at a massive scale. And financing means both domestic resource mobilization and mobilization of international capital. That's how it's been done everywhere. And there is a lot of international capital available. When international capital sees that Africa is the fast-growing region of the world, the capital will pour in, and at long term, and at low interest rates. And it will be institutions like AFREXIMBANK that are in the lead of providing this low-cost financing. The multilateral banks in Africa are essential to this task, and especially important in the coming decade. They are the pipeline for low-cost financing to finance trade, as AFREXIMBANK does, to finance infrastructure, to finance also the human capital development, because governments should take on financing for education too, if their current domestic government revenues are insufficient and will take time to raise, then international financing is essential because the rate of return to education is 20% compound annual. So if one needs to finance that internationally because domestic revenues are insufficient, go for it. But make sure that it's long-term, low-cost finance. Now here, I just want to say a word about the global financial architecture, because in just 3 days, we're going to have the Financing for Development conference in Sevilla, Spain, which is the fourth global Financing for Development conference. The point is the following. The poorer regions of the world, the lower income countries, lower middle income, low income countries, have the highest growth potential in the whole world. The idea that their credit ratings are lower than the credit ratings of the slow-growing rich countries gets everything wrong. The idea that the IMF tells Africa, oh, no, don't borrow so much, your debt is too high, is actually completely wrong. The problem isn't the scale of debt. The problem is that it's short-term. The problem is that it's high cost. What is needed is long-term, low-cost financing through the multilateral banks and through direct private financing, whether it's through bond markets or equity finance, because investment requires a 20 or 30-year time horizon. It can't be financed on the basis of 1 or 2 year loans. It needs to be financed on the basis of long-term, reliable financing. This brings me to one more point that I want to add to this discussion, which is that one of the reasons why Africa finds it so hard to borrow is that it borrows in dollars, in US dollars. And one of the reasons it borrows in US dollars is that each of the national currencies in Africa is too small, or the monetary unions up until now have been controlled by France. This needs to change. Africa needs its own monetary sovereignty. Africa should move to a monetary union. Africa should be borrowing in its own currency. Africa should have a lender of last resort, which is not the IMF, because the IMF is not a lender of last resort. The IMF waits till you're nearly half dead, and then it lends you some money on punitive terms that prevent rapid growth. What we need is an African currency, African monetary institutions, African settlements, an African lender of last resort. And we need Africa, of course, to have relations with other regions of the world that will also ensure stable financial relations. The Federal Reserve has not been Africa's friend. The Federal Reserve doesn't give swap lines. The Federal Reserve does not protect Africa when U.S. interest rates soar. The Federal Reserve does not look after Africa like it might look after Mexico or Ukraine or some other place in the world. So Africa needs its friends all over the world. The old partners are not partners. I'm sorry to say it. Africa needs some new partners, and new partners are obviously on the scene. New partners include India, with Prime Minister Modi leading the way in the G20 to welcome Africa as the 21st member of the G21, a big development that I pushed hard for as well. Africa needs close relations with China, because China is a booming economy that provides almost a roadmap for 40 years of very rapid growth, as well as partnership through the Belt and Road and other initiatives. Though I tell my Chinese friends, please make the loans long-term, not short-term. Africa needs strong relations with the Gulf countries. Why is it that the Gulf countries promised $1 trillion to invest in slow-growing United States when that money should be deployed next door across the Red Sea in Africa in fast-growing Africa. This is what needs to be mobilized. So in short, ladies and gentlemen, plan for, look for, expect, and work for a very high growth next 30 years in Africa. Do it continental wide. Make sure that AFREXIMBANK, African Development Bank, the other multilateral institutions are in the forefront. They are key for an Africa-wide strategy. Let and encourage strong leadership of the African Union Commission to build the Africa Continental Free Trade Area so that the interconnections, the infrastructure, the continental-wide investments in education are done and accomplished. And look for a financing strategy that is consistent with rapid growth, not with austerity. Africa needs more debt, not less debt, but not short-term debt. Long-term, patient, low-interest capital to make the massive investments that will bring Africa to high-income status by 2063. No question it can be done. It can be done even sooner than 2063. But this is the trajectory. It's why AFREXIMBANK and other banks are so crucial, why they absolutely require, without question, preferred creditor status. They should have all of the status to be the bulwark for Africa's rapid growth period. And anyone that says different from that, whether it's the so-called Paris Club or the Bretton Woods institutions, is just playing their own game. They're not speaking for Africa's interests. So it's a bit of a diplomatic fight ahead, but it's absolutely clear that Africa needs large-scale financing for a major investment acceleration to achieve the kind of rapid growth that is now in sight. Thank you very much, and I really look forward to the discussion ahead, and I also look forward to visiting AFREXIMBANK very soon in headquarters. So thank you for letting me be part of this today.
And thank you, Dr. Sachs. We're not going to let you go yet. When it comes to a friend of Africa, Dr. Sachs, oh no, he's disappeared. No, bring him back, please. I don't know where he's gone because we're not finished with Dr. Sachs yet. Lower that music, please. No, get rid of that music. We have Professor Sachs here. And when it comes to a friend of Africa, Professor Sachs is a friend of Africa, is he not? Give him a round of applause. In fact, I think someone should give Professor Sachs a chieftaincy title. Come on. Or Luwale Sachs or something like that, right? Now, Dr. Sachs, we're going to have a quick fireside chat, a deep dive. It's going to be a rapid one, but I've got two great speakers to join you here. I'm going to invite and give them a round of applause as they take the stage. Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, who's a distinguished fellow, Asia Research Institute. But the session will be moderated by Mr. V. Shankar, co-founder and CEO, Gateway Partners. There you go. Take it away, guys.
Is that working? Yeah. Good morning. Thank you. Jeff, that was fantastic. Thought-provoking as always. Terrific. I hope you can see me.
I don't see you yet. Somehow the camera needs to be turned on again if possible. I see me.
You're not
but
missing
I hear
much.
you
It's
well.
okay.
Oh, there, now I see you. Wonderful. Perfect.
We just heard from one of the most influential thinkers on the global stage. We're going to hear from another, seated right next to me, Kishore Mahbubani. You heard from him yesterday. He's back with more. He's just like Rambo. You've seen him before. He's back with more. Rambo Mahbubani was president of the UN Security Council. He was a diplomat for 33 years. He's a successful author and somebody at the intersection of public policy and geopolitics. So Kishore, and a fellow Singaporean as well. So Kishore, you just heard from Jeffrey. Anything you violently disagree with him I don't want a love fest. Oh, I love Jeffrey and we think the same. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
I hear you. I still don't see both of you. I don't know if the camera is somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but in any event, I hear you well, Kishore.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for your very inspiring address that you gave to the audience here. I'm not sure whether you're aware, but you got several rounds of applause from this audience here,
Nice.
and you deserved it. I thought the best way I could compliment what Jeff is saying. Now, Jeff, I share your optimism about Africa, but I want to add 3 notes of caution. Because, one of the privileges of my life is that I've actually worked with great leaders who took a poor country like Singapore with a per capita income like Ghana in 1965 or $500 to where Singapore is today is $88,000. And so I've studied these leaders very carefully. And the lesson I learned from studying these leaders is that development is not easy. It is extremely difficult. And it's important to have a realistic understanding of the difficult choices you have to make if you're going to succeed in development. And I'll give 3 concrete examples. The first one, and this is the lesson I learned from Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, Rajaratnam, the 3 founding leaders of Singapore, that nothing succeeds without hard work and discipline. And that's absolutely critical. No one should believe that there is an easy, smooth road to development. It requires incredible amount of dedication and discipline. And I can tell you, having had the privilege of shaking hands with President Xi Jinping, having had the privilege of sitting down for over an hour-long conversation with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, what strikes you when you meet these leaders is the amount of hard work and discipline that they put into their mission. So that's one critical thing. The second thing, and this is a very important practical thing, and you were saying, Jeff, that you should welcome foreign investment, including from Africa and so on and so forth. It does mean, therefore, that you've got to treat the foreign investor with a tremendous amount of respect and how do you say, welcome them very warmly. And I say this because, and I'll tell you a simple story that I hope that I'll explain what I'm trying to say. One country that hasn't been mentioned so far in the discussions, which is actually now today one of the fastest growing economies in the world, is also in Southeast Asia. It's Vietnam. And as you know, Vietnam went through 50 years of war, right? From 1940 to 1990, 50 years of war. And I can tell you that when they decided to switch and stop fighting and start developing, they had to change their instincts. It wasn't easy. They succeeded in fighting the Americans by being good guerrilla fighters. You ambush the Americans when they came to fight in Vietnam. So you know what? They were so good at ambushing that they also ambushed the foreign investors. I'm not kidding. The foreign investors would come, make a deal, sign the contract, and then the Vietnamese would say, sorry, we have to renegotiate again. And it took some effort on the part of the friends of Vietnam to tell our Vietnamese friends, hey, that's not how you treat foreign investors. When you sign a contract, it is sacrosanct. You got to stick to that contract and don't change a word. Okay? Now, that also, frankly, that kind of discipline is extremely critical. And the way you treat the foreign investor from the time he arrives at the airport, as I said yesterday, how the foreign investor is treated when he arrives at the airport makes such a big difference. The third point I want to emphasize, and this is especially critical in Africa, because Jeff is absolutely right. There are 1.5, 1.4 billion people in China, 1.4 billion people in India, and 1.5 billion people in Africa. But the difference is that in China, you have one unified economy. India, you have one unified economy, and Africa, you don't. So the critical thing, therefore, is to remove the obstacles at the borders. And again, another story that you'll understand this. Even though India has been one economy, for a long time within India, because they had different VAT rates, value added tax rates, the truck going from East India to west part of India wouldn't go in a straight line. The truck would go north to escape a VAT in Bihar, go around Bihar, come down, go south somewhere, go to Karnataka to avoid another VAT, and then the truck will go this way, zigzag through India. Now that's obviously economically inefficient. But I suspect this happens also because there's so many borders in Africa. So you have to find ways and means of ensuring that when trucks and goods go across Africa, they go in a straight line and don't do what the Indian trucks used to do, zigzag across different VATs. And by the way, Modi destroyed that.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the Indian economy is booming, and Africa can do the same.
So now we have a unified GST regime, and I think the African Continental Free Trade Agreement will eventually achieve that as well.
I mean, I've been watching you, and
so, Jeff, just and by the way, you made this comment on hard work. There's a famous quote from Prime Minister Modi which says he believes in the school of hard work, not in the school of Harvard. So, anyway, so Jeff, just coming back to you, are you still there, Jeff? Can you hear me?
I am. I hear you very well.
Okay, you mentioned about touched on rating agencies and so on. There is a body of opinion in Africa that rating agencies don't understand Africa. They are unfair to Africa and possibly biased. So how do you resolve it? Is it a question of engaging with them, educating them, or starting your own rating agencies? And if so, how do they get credibility?
The rating agencies do not understand development. This, they say to me quite straightforwardly. Their job is to predict the risk of a credit event or a default. They're pretty good at that. But what is missing is a design of strategy in Africa to take advantage of the fact that Africa's growth prospect is actually the highest in the world, something that rating agencies don't understand and don't even incorporate into their models. They don't know it, in fact. And what I mean by this is that African governments individually need to show to the rating agencies and need to show, whether it's an African rating agency or Moody's, they need to show, here is our scenario over the next 25 years and why we're not going to default, why this is absolutely sound financing. And you, the rating agency, need to get that right. And so this is work both on the African side and on the rating agency side. I'm somewhere I'm in between these two places, and I see that there's a deal to be made, but it requires some hard work to actually make that deal. The ratings are wrong, but it's not a matter of just saying that. It's a matter of showing that. Here is the borrowing strategy.
Jeff,
here is why it makes sense.
Jeff, if I just come in, I agree with what you're saying, but rating agencies do understand fast growth companies. If they are in Western markets, that's how we get a high yield loan market. But be that as it may, my question for you is, you mentioned absolutely the need for foreign capital, because if you have to grow at 10%, you have to have a 40% investment rate, and there is a deficit of savings. And you talked about low cost, long-term financing being the need. Absolutely agree. But where is that pot of gold?
Yes. So let me say, by the way, the rating agencies absolutely understand fast growing, say, tech companies and so forth. But if you look at how they make sovereign credit ratings versus how they make business ratings, you'd be shocked. With businesses, they actually look at the business plans and the business prospects. With sovereign ratings, they use a crude cookie cutter methodology that is actually numerical scores based on useless indicators. So the truth is, they do it completely differently. And then they apply something that they call the sovereign ceiling, which is to say, if we give Ghana whatever rating we give it, no entity in Ghana, no fast growing company with great IP or great staff can have a credit rating higher than the sovereign. They kill the whole private sector credit rating of the country because they assign the sovereign ceiling concept, which also makes no economic sense these days. So I agree with you. They know what they're doing when it comes to business. They do not understand what they're doing when it comes to sovereign borrowing or this sovereign ceiling concept, which is completely outmoded. And so this, I just want to make
and
this,
where are the sources of capital? And where is the source of capital? The pot of gold.
The world savings are $30 trillion a year. Africa gets a trickle of that. Even it's negative in some years because Africa's repaying more debt, amortizing debt rather than receiving new net funding. There's no shortage of global capital. There's a shortage of attitude and strategy to tap it. But practically speaking, the multilateral banks like AFREXIMBANK or the African Development Bank or the Islamic Development Bank or the new development bank of the BRICS in Shanghai are all hugely important. And so the role of the multilateral development banks right now is the leading edge of the rapid growth period. So I believe that there's a lot of private finance that will come in both in debt and equity. I'm a huge fan of the Belt and Road Initiative. I think that Africa and China have a natural partnership, but I also want to emphasize that India and Africa have a strong partnership. The Gulf and Africa have a strong partnership. There are trillions of dollars in sovereign wealth funds, and many of them in the Gulf, which is in search of what Africa has to offer, whether it's foodstuffs or whether it is the strategic minerals that lead to the strategic batteries and so forth, the rare earth magnets that we heard so much about in the last 8 weeks because China's got them and the United States needs them, for example. Africa, of course, is the place where the Gulf should be putting its hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's a case that needs to be made. But Addis is quite close to the Gulf. And Addis should be making that case. The African Union Commission should be making that case. The Africa-wide institutions, AFREXIMBANK in Cairo, very close. So this is a case that absolutely can be made. It's not going to come, unfortunately, in Washington right now. It's not going to come in Europe right now. Maybe someday those places will get it, but they don't get it right now, frankly speaking.
Okay, point well made. So to paraphrase you, look east, not west for sources of capital. Kishore, turning to you. If you look at the history of Asian development, I would look at three things. One is the role of infrastructure, which Jeff talked about, and what my dear friend Mr. Dangote is really doing to turbocharge growth in Africa, infrastructure. The role of institutions, we talked about. How much do incentives play a role in development?
Well, I mean, there's no question that, I mean, the paradox that Jeff pointed to is that we live in a world that is awash with capital, right? And yet, as Jeff himself said, there's only a trickle that comes to Africa. And that's something is wrong down there because if you look in terms of potential growth.
But Asia was in a similar situation, Kishore, at the turn after the World War.
Sure.
How did they make that trickle into a barrage, into a flood of capital? So what can we learn from that experience?
Well, the answer is that it's not easy, but you've got to, in a sense, start with small wins. And I can tell you when Singapore started, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, the architect of Singapore's economic miracle, if any factory opened, didn't matter what the factory did, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a high-tech factory. It can be completely low-tech, something that manufactures bricks, simple bricks, or manufactures, toys. Doesn't matter. Any factory that's open, you make a big deal of it. You celebrate it, and you keep moving up the ladder gradually. And I can tell you the reason why Asia has succeeded so well over the last 30 to 40 years is because the Asians have been on a great learning journey. And the learning journey is that based on a very simple principle, why is my neighbor doing better than me? And so, for example, as you know, Korea that was colonized by Japan brutally, right? Korea was colonized brutally by Japan. The Koreans hate the Japanese. But you know what? They also asked themselves, how did the Japanese industrialize so well? So what did the Koreans do? They quietly learned from the Japanese, whom they hated, right? And similarly, after the four tigers succeeded, South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, then the ASEAN countries who also had difficulties each other say, hey, what can we learn from each other? So the important thing, therefore, is to go for small, easy, low-lying victories, and then also to learn from your neighbors. And I'll give you a concrete example. Singapore produced a wonderful investment brochure on why you should invest in Singapore. We thought of everything: tax incentives, cost of labor, expectation of capital, everything. We thought of everything, put it in one brochure. And the Malaysians are very smart. They took the brochure, they replicated the whole brochure, they just changed Singapore to Penang. And guess what? All the investment went to Penang. I'm not joking. I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. This is what happened. And then, of course, others did the same. So, in a sense,
So you're recommending
we had to go through a great learning journey, and it's important for Africa also to go through the same learning journey because that's how Asia succeeded.
So you're saying copy as long as it's not for an exam.
Yes, absolutely. Copy
as a professor.
don't copy in exams, but copy best practices.
Yeah. So we got to think of a monitor here saying time's up. So just to wrap up the discussion, I'm going to give the last word to both of you actually. One. So first, let's go to Jeff in New York because he's soon going to be. I think you've been awake from very early. Jeff, what are you most positive about the global state of economy? So it's not necessarily for Africa, but which could have implication for Africa. What are you most positive about? What are you most worried about? Very quickly.
I'm most positive about the fact that with the new technologies that we have, we can make breakthroughs across the board in education, online, in healthcare, in advances in services, in advances in agriculture, in advances in mining sector. We have a cornucopia of new breakthroughs that enable us to have really the shared prosperity in the world. I'm most worried about the fact that my own country can't get along with anybody right now. So I'm hoping that the United States calms down and understands that catching up by the rest of the world's not a bad thing, but is a good thing. But I want to end on one point because, first of all, I want everyone to know there is no one in the world that knows the Asia experience better than Kishore. And so Kishore has taught us all about how Asia did it. But one point that I want to underscore about Singapore, if you look at the world rankings of educational quality, and that is the Program on International Student Achievement, PISA. Singapore is #1 in the world, in all three categories: science, math, and reading. And this, at the root, is the success story. You have an incredibly well-educated population. And so please, for Africa, let's make sure that the young people are really empowered with the knowledge and the skills, and then with all of the dynamic entrepreneurship and energy that Mr. Dangote exemplifies for all of us, we're going to see that boom occur. We're going to see this amazing period ahead.
Thank you, Jeff.
Singapore is a great model for all of us. We're all trying to keep up with Singapore, but it's an amazing success, and it's an amazing learning journey, as Kishore said. And you learn because you have quality education, and Singapore is #1 in the world.
Very good. Last word to you, Kishore.
Okay, very quickly. I know that time is out, so I'll be very brief. I can tell you the exciting thing that has happened that I see in the world, by the way. And I can say this with great confidence because when I grew up as a child in Singapore, and I say this and I describe this in my memoirs, Living the Asian Century, I believe that I, as an Asian with a brown skin, I was inferior to the white man. The white man was always smarter, and I, as an Asian, I had to look up to the white man and learn from the white man because he was smarter than me. But I can tell you in Asia, the biggest revolution that has happened is an explosion of cultural confidence among the 4.5 billion Asians. And this explosion of cultural confidence means that Asians no longer believe that they're inferior. And this explosion of cultural confidence means, and as Jeff is right, it comes from a lot of learning, that they believe that they can confidently make their own future and create a better world. So in that sense, what we are going to see in the 21st century is a very different world from what we see in the 20th century.
There's no reason why Africa can't be confident because we just built in Nigeria the world's single largest refinery through Aliko Dangote. So on that note, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Kishore.
Our sincere appreciation to our panelists and moderator for this wonderful session. Another round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Now, one name, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Elumelu. I don't have to say more. Just his name. C'est un nom qui, à lui seul, incarne bien plus qu'une réussite individuelle. Il bâtit des écosystèmes, il crée. Welcome for her.
Folks. Anjali, thank you very much. Of Africa, and our friends, of course, from the Caribbean. It's fantastic to have everyone here. As Marie-Angélie just said, I have got a formidable guest that I will be in conversation with shortly. And what we're going to be discussing is a reminder of what can be achieved when the will is there and, of course, the money. So we're going to hear how it's done, what was done, what worked, and what can be done moving forward. So we are looking at decades of delivering on a shared aspiration. And as you heard shortly, we are talking to Mr. Tony Elumelu. He is an investor. He is a champion of African entrepreneurship. Is that he is a philanthropist, and that is at the heart of what he does and why he does it. And we'll be finding out more about that shortly. And this year is a key year for him because he set a target of 10 years back when he set up the foundation. And that 10 years has matured. So we're going to be finding out if he met his goals. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, in welcoming Mr. Tony Elumelu to the stage. Welcome. Please take a seat. Now, I have interviewed in my job with BBC, Sky, Al Jazeera, ENCA. I've interviewed many many Africans who have the power. But it's not often that we talk about the charitable side, the philanthropic side of those with the power in their hands. So this is one of the most exciting conversations I'm going to have with you, Mr. Elimulu. But first off, Afri-capitalism. This is your term. What I want to find out is how has AFREXIMBANK collaborated with you and embraced Afri-capitalism? And what were the results? And has Africa in general embraced Afri-capitalism? A definition to begin with would be good.
I think, let me start by congratulating AFREXIM and Professor Karama for this event and say I'm honored to be part of it. And happy also as group chairman of making it impactful to across the continent. I think I'd like to share a short story, and that story captures everything. I was a banker before, and in 2010 I moved on, and I decided to diversify and do what some of my friends have been doing in trying to help empower Africa and transform the continent. So one of the sectors we decided to invest in was the energy sector. And energy investment, as you all know, is highly capital intensive. So we approached Shell for a bilateral conversation, had a bilateral conversation with Shell to acquire some of their assets in Nigeria. And this was, we started the conversation in 2017. Shell finally agreed. And, but to agree, they said we needed to show evidence of capacity because they get many inquiries from people. And so the asset we wanted to acquire from Shell, we identified OML 11 and OML 17. The sum we agreed with the Shell was $2.5 billion. And we needed to show proof of this money before proceeding. And we tried on our resources, but we had a shortfall of $750 million. And because we needed debt of 30%, we ran to AFREXIM, we ran to Professor Keorama, and between AFREXIM and African Finance Corporation, AFC, AFREXIM wrote a check of, or supported, committed to supporting us with $600 million, and African Finance Corporation, 100, and how it was done. And because of this, we were able to do this transaction, even though towards the end, we had a hiccup from our own government, and it should be in the hand of the private sector, even though we choose one. So we chose one and reduced the size of 2020. We concluded this transaction in 2020 in the midst of COVID. And today, without AFREXIM's involvement, because you talked about African capitalism, which is the private sector role in developing the continent, without their intervention, we would not have been able to do the transaction. Today, this acquisition we made with the support of AFREXIM has gone on to become extremely transformative, not just for us investors, but for the continent. We today produce oil, over 58,000 barrels of oil a day. In fact, NNPC just wrote to the company, we are the highest production, we recorded the highest production increase in Nigerian oil sector, both for local and international oil companies in the past 5 years. It would not have been made possible if AFREXIM, it would not have been possible if AFREXIM did not support us. So that intervention by AFREXIM, $600 million at that time, even though the check they wrote at the end was $250 million because we got other financial institutions to join. But that is African capitalism in action. That is AFREXIM, private sector, working together to create employment for our people, working together to industrialize our continent, working together to transform Africa. We need that kind of intervention.
So you've mentioned one enabler, one key ingredient, because I'm thinking, how do you then take what happened and replicate it? Can it be replicated, or is there just something so unique about this particular collaboration that it worked? Was it just that the two of you got it and you acted? What are the key ingredients that other multinationals, other banks, other corporations can say, okay, we need speed, we need to act fast. We need what else? What
No,
needs to be
the
there?
most important thing is capital.
Capital.
Capital is the most important thing. And of course, the private sector, and this is what I say to my colleagues and friends in the private sector, we must not burn bridges. If when you're supported by financial institutions like AFREXIMBANK supported us, you must honor your obligation, you must pay, you must perform, and you must also help to create employment in the process. Our commitment, the obligation or the support we got from AFREXIMBANK, we're far ahead. So people should empower institutions like AFREXIMBANK to enable them support other entrepreneurs. We need more entrepreneurs in Africa doing the kind of thing we and others are doing to help develop the country. That is Africa Pluralism also. Everyone working together in government, development partners, financial institutions, working together to capacitize and enable the private sector on the continent to help to catalyze economic transformation. If we did not get the support of AFREXIMBANK for our acquisition, we will not today, as energies, not only have we increased production substantially, helping Nigeria achieve their 2 million barrel per day aspiration, we are the biggest gas injectors in the local domestic gas market for Eastern Nigeria. That is helping companies east of the Niger to industrialize, to fire their, for those who are into power generation, to improve their electric generation. So this can, so to AFREXIMBANK, they just wrote a check. But to the private sector, to the country, to the continent, it's more than writing a check. It's about catalyzing development.
Okay, so we all know that entrepreneurs are the risk takers, the private sector.
Yes.
You're the dreamers, but you talk about dreamers, but you know, they have to be achievers as well. You've also said that we need to act ruthlessly, quickly.
I didn't say
Do
ruthlessly.
my research.
Okay, no. I said execute. I said, but not here, not on this panel. I said execute ruthlessly, but not here, not here. But really, listen.
Yeah. So, but are governments doing that? Are they working fast enough? Are they keeping up with you and creating an enabling environment for you guys to come in and lead?
So I speak as an investor that invests in 20 African countries. And I know that the investment environment today is different from what it used to be 4 or 5 years ago. Starting from Nigeria, for instance, I told you we cooked a transaction, $2.5 billion. The government of the day said no, they spoiled it, they killed it. But today we have a government in office that has, so you said investors will not invest in your country if they think the investment environment is hostile.
Okay.
So the best way to attract investors is support your domestic investors. As they invest in their economy, others will see, and what is good for domestic investors is good for foreign investors. So back to the point, we are seeing improvement all across countries, in Ghana, in Zambia, all the countries we operate in, we are seeing government is gradually improving. And of course, I saw President Obasanjo coming here, who was the father of it all when it all started, helping to encourage all of us.
So you mentioned a very different investment environment. I mean, what a timely thing to say when you look at where we are today, the geopolitics, the impact of the trade wars. Now, this was a subject that I brought to my panel yesterday. Basically, I said, is what we are seeing today, literally on an hourly basis sometimes, the changes, the tumult, the instability, the volatility, it was actually rephrased. The narrative was put on its head. And we put out the idea that perhaps this is an opportunity. Could this be Africa's right time, right place to be open for business? What would you do with the likes of Ayers Holdings, and AFREXIMBANK, how would you act to profit from the volatility that we're seeing today?
So first is we've always said Africa is ready for business.
Yeah.
But what is important is to let it come alive. But I will again go back to what institutions like AFREXIM are doing. AFREXIM is actually helping to catalyze the development of our continent. And that's why I started with my own story, my own experience with AFREXIM. Because without their support, I come from banking background. But when we had this kind of transaction, one nation cannot do it. And for us, we even decided that we will not touch UBA. UBA did not fund any part of this transaction. UBA did not. We have Standard Chartered, AFC, AFREXIM, APSA in South Africa. We got all international companies to come together, financial to support it. That is how you develop a continent. So first, for me, to make Africa rise and to make Africa's time actually become tangible and realistic, we need to have solid financial institutions to support the dreams and aspirations of private sector. Two, we need the African private sector, if and when given the opportunity, fulfill your own part. Execute, that's why ruthless execution. Deliver. Ruthless. Deliver, but more importantly, have the discipline to service and repay your loan.
Are Africans disciplined enough when it comes to financial
They didn't to service your
institutions?
loan. But also it's important that we look at the young ones.
Yes.
We need to know that we are where we are today because at some point in time, we got one opportunity or the other. We must not climb and take the ladder out. We must deliberately and consciously think of the next generation. And that is why what we do at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, trying to support the young Africans, young men and women, all across the African countries, because we believe that poverty anywhere is a threat to all of us everywhere. And we also know that it can't just be about us alone. We need the private sector, a strong private sector, and a pipeline of those people, entrepreneurs, etc., so we can develop on them. So for Africa to rise, we need to fix those basic things. Improvement in access to electricity, having capital, and that capital can be from within, can be from us. But as Jefferson said, people will see what's happening in your economy. You don't even need to advertise for foreign investment. People will naturally come in. And most importantly, we need to prioritize our young ones, young youth, and our women. We need to bring them into the mainstream of economic activity so that the development of Africa is holistic and all encompassing.
Before we come on to your foundation, there are two other points I just want to touch on, Tony, if I could. Humanity and social wealth. Why are these important to you? And how do they fit in with our discussion today?
Everything. Why do we talk of development? What is this? What's the meaning of growth without human impact? Everything boils down to people. We want to have a better society. We want individuals to meet their human basic needs and aspirations. So everything we do ultimately cascades to the individual.
Is it cascading? It doesn't seem to cascade, though.
But
that seems to be.
No, but that's what it should be. And every sensible government and also the private sector, we must keep that in mind. That, so responsibility to keep that in view. And to do that, we must create jobs, must involve and engage our young ones. Because to them
is the African continent with digital connectivity. And if they don't catch up, what will the cost be?
There's a revolution. We can't miss the fourth. And for us not to meet the fourth, the digital connectivity and access is so critical. The world will be like tension. This an interesting conversation I've had before. We can't talk of AI when access to electricity is horrible. They don't have it. We don't have it. About 60% of our people don't have access to electricity. How can we be talking of AI? So it's important for electricity. And by making investment, cannot develop a country.
First off, what role should African multinationals have in fostering the next generation of leaders, but also business builders on the continent? What role should, we know what you're doing, AFREXIMBANK, other multinationals, what should they be doing?
I like to answer questions like this with stories, but the realization that first, no one but us will develop our people, our continent, and two, that poverty anywhere is a threat to all of us everywhere. And third point that at some point in life, it's about legacy, it's about impact, and not how much you have in your bank account. That's and so we set up this and we felt that the luck we benefited growing up, as I said earlier, all of us are where we are today because at some point in time we got one help or the other. Okay? That we needed to democratize luck and let us to create the 1,000 so created the 20 all across from all occasions. For we the 20 DP, the 20 DP, EU, you know what I'm talking about. So to help these young, we can develop the economy and have
comes from a member of the public. Okay, now for me, this is more important than my question. So I'm going to pose this question to a stimulating conversation. And he says, I've got a question for Mr. Elimulu. I went, go on then. And he said, so let me just, here we go. That are young are very, very restless. There aren't enough jobs. Great impact creative industry to get financing because traditional banks don't get it. They don't get it. The banks are unwilling to fund these businesses. For example, banks don't know how to take action. What can Tony do as chairman of one of Africa's biggest banks and having a foundation for young?
What can we do? It's not even what can we do, it's what are we doing?
Okay.
So today, through the Tony Edumelu Foundation, we have provided 1,000 young African males and females. Fact. We have trained over 1 million young, because at times, not just about young African doing right now. Okay.
Can we get the cameras in very quickly? I don't know if you can see them.
For this panel, so inspiring, right? I feel like listening to all the conversations this morning. We are indeed. So I do have outside on the road by the hotel, and Congress will be told unless removed immediately.
The challenge of Nigeria as a free state in 20th century Africa is the need to revive the stature of man in Africa and restore the dignity of man in the world. The human family as equal. Under no circumstance shall we accept the idea that the black race is inferior to any other race. To associate with us in this great adventure of restoring the dignity of man in the world. There are many leaders who can give active support and assistance to our nation at its supreme hour of need. When Britain transferred power to us on 1st October 1960, we were no longer an expression of geography, but a reality of history. Let us bind the nation's wound and let us heal the breaches of the past so that in forging our nation, there shall emerge on this continent a hate-free, fear-free, and greed-free people who shall be in the vanguard of a world task force whose assignment is not only to revive the stature of man in Africa, but to restore the dignity of man in the world. I have made up my mind to do all that lies in my power so that our newly won freedom shall endure. All that remains for us to do now is for our leaders and their followers to demonstrate that spiritual resilience which had enabled us to survive the onslaught of the past. With faith in the eventual success of our adventure in the Community of Nations, we can look forward to the morrow with hope and charity for our fellow man, knowing that the task has been well done and the prospects of a future are bright.
Another round of applause for the powerful prose and passion of Nnamdi Azikiwe, that voice from the past that guides us to the future. I did the roll call of a dizzying array of heads of states, vice president representatives, former presidents this morning. And as they come in and I recognize them, I just want to say us to welcome the former president of Senegal, His Excellency Macky Sall is in the room. The former president of Niger, Mamadou Issoufou, and the champion of the AFCFTA is here with us. Resplendent in white. I don't know if any of you were, I'm sure most of you were here yesterday to hear his wonderful thoughts. We have our father here in Nigeria, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, former president of Niger. You're welcome, Your Excellency. Representing the President of Chad, we have the Honorable Minister of Finances here with us, Tahir Hamid Ngulin is here. And also representing the President of Tanzania, we're very blessed to have in our presence His Excellency Philip Mpango, who is, of course, a very top economist in Africa as well. Now, and in due course, I will continue to welcome as I see you. But let's move on now. You know, the one distinguishing feature about the AFREXIMBANK annual meetings is that it's not just talk; it's also walk. Deals are made, sometimes in the tens of billions of dollars. And that's, I think, what distinguishes our AAMs from others. This moment is no different. We have a number of deal signing. We'll do them rapidly. That's why the table is out there. There are some lawyers with pens and documents in the back. So I'm going to get started. This is deal number one. It's a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, between AFREXIMBANK as the lender and the government of Gabon relating to the energy and manganese. For that, I will call the co-signatories on behalf of AFREXIMBANK. Please welcome Dr. George Elombi, Executive Vice President. And on behalf of Gabon, we're so pleased to have the Minister of Economy and Finance for Gabon. Welcome, His Excellency Henri Claude Oyima. So that is the lender and that is the borrower. The lawyers are standing by with their golden pens and their documents. So I would invite you to take your seats, gentlemen. We have witnesses too, as is the nature of these things. Now, as they take to the stage, let me tell you what they're signing. The size of this deal is enormous. It's not 500 million. It's not 1 billion. It's not 2 billion. It's not even 3 billion. It's 3.8 billion US dollar deal size right here. The African Export-Import Bank and the government of the Republic of Gabon are formally entering into a transformative memorandum of understanding to strengthen trade and investment collaboration. Now, this landmark agreement that they're signing there, signed by George Elombi and Minister Henri Claude Oyima, outlines a strategic partnership to drive agro-industrial diversification, formalize gold trading, enhance manganese value addition, accelerate power sector development, and modernize Gabon's railway infrastructure so we can carry these value-added minerals, metals, and so on. Now, together, these initiatives aim to boost economic growth, create jobs, and position Gabon as a regional trade and industrial hub in the era of the AFCFTA. This MOU reflects a shared commitment to unlocking Africa's potential through sustainable development and intercontinental cooperation. This is an important milestone. Please go ahead. If you've not signed, please go ahead and sign. It is an important milestone in Gabon's journey towards prosperity and continental integration. What you are seeing here is a deal signed, an MOU between AFREXIMBANK and the government of Gabon relating to energy and manganese and railway infrastructure. It's a big one, 3.8 billion US dollars. 3.8 billion US dollars signed there. If you need further proof of the power of AFREXIMBANK to influence transformative change in Africa. You just saw it there. Ladies and gentlemen, the MOU is signed. Congratulations to both parties, but you're not free yet. We've got another signing for Gabon as well. We're giving you 2 for 1 here. Gentlemen, I understand you also have something else to sign. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a facility agreement also between AFREXIMBANK and the Ministry of Economy and Finance of Gabon. This is a 200 million euros. It says euros. Facility to Gabon. Let me tell you, please go ahead, gentlemen, and sign. I'll tell them, I'll describe the deal. AFREXIMBANK has granted the government of Gabon, the Republic of Gabon, 200 million euros, amortizing term loan to support strategic investments in the country's energy sector, specifically financing construction of 3 thermal power plants with a combined capacity of 300 megawatts to address power shortages in Gabon. It's a 7-year structured facility and it's designed to leverage Gabon's existing repayment capacity while unlocking economic potential by providing energy infrastructure, enhancing electricity supply, and fostering sustainable development in Gabon. This loan that you saw underscores AFREXIMBANK's deep commitment to support critical infrastructure projects that drive industrialization and economic growth across Africa. 200 million euros. Signed, gentlemen? Congratulations to Minister of Finance of Gabon, Henri Claude Oyima, and representing AFREXIMBANK, George Elombi. Just one more to go, and then we'll continue with the program. As I ask the parties to please exit the stage, we'll move quickly on to the next deal. If I could ask you to please move to your chairs, we want to get the next deal in. Now, for this next deal, I call on our EVP, Ms. Kanayo Awani. Kanayo, are you here? Where is Kanayo? Come, yes, Kanayo. The hardest working lady in African finance, Kanayo Awani. And for Gasmeth, I'm calling the Chief Financial Officer for Gasmeth, Mr. Bruce Burrows. Mr. Bruce Burrows, ladies and gentlemen, for Gasmeth. What are they signing? Well, it's a transaction, 233 million US dollars. It's a methane gas to CNG project. So methane gas to CNG project. It's a syndicated finance facility in favor of Gasmeth Energy Limited. They're in Rwanda, out of which $85 million for AFREXIMBANK. These are both parties. So Gasmeth Energy Limited is the borrower and AFREXIMBANK as the MLA and the lender. It's the development of barge upstream, midstream capacity and downstream infrastructure equipped with offshore processing facilities for extracting methane gas from Lake Kivu. Onshore, the methane will be compressed into compressed natural gas, as they call it, CNG, and it's supplied to Rwandan consumers to replace traditional fuels in industries, such as power generation, transport, and also domestic use in homes. Now, the government of Rwanda considers this very important project as, quote, a strategic path in line with GOR vision to convert its current energy use to cleaner and greener fuel sources. It's all part of a drive for environment protection and to reduce reliance on traditional biomass. Now, upon Gasmeth's Lake Kivu development project in the wider plan, the big plan is for net zero in the Rwandan economy. And the project's been included in the government's planning and particularly has been recognized as a contribution to the path to net zero. And also, of course, the planning of the Paris Accord. That is $233 million signed, ladies and gentlemen. So that is the project. Those are the signings. I'm sure there'll be more to come. Thank you very much to both signees. Now, we'll move straight on with the program. I believe next we have panel session 1. Now, we're thrilled to have here what promises to be an extraordinary session. One where the future of African multilateral finance takes center stage, and where we ask the crucial question in this fractured world. Now, we'll dive into how critical institutions like AFREXIMBANK can help shape policies and promote unity, not just within Africa, but between continents, even as the world grows more divided. So what we're going to do here is we're first going to bring in my learned friend, Professor Emmanuel Achimpong, onto the stage, who's going to set the scene, soften the ground, as we say in media. And then I'm going to take a microphone together with my co-MC, who's a Francophone, and we are going to go around and take some interventions from the sitting heads of states, the former heads of states, and their representatives. Isn't that going to be interesting? So please welcome to the stage the Ellen Gurney Professor of History and Professor of African and African American Studies, Professor Emmanuel Achimpong. Please, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Your Excellencies and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emmanuel Achimpong. I'm a professor at Harvard University. Let me start off by thanking AFREXIMBANK for the honor and the privilege of being asked to moderate this plenary session with such distinguished members, both former and sitting heads of states or their representatives. I start off by stressing that this is a conversation, and I'll explain a few housekeeping rules, and then we will start. I think it is auspicious and timely that we have both former and sitting heads of states or their reps from Africa and the Caribbean here today. 60 years ago, when we were achieving independence, leaders from the Caribbean and Africa were in conversation about their political economies and how they could bring these closer together. Norman Manley of Jamaica, Eric Williams of Trinidad were in conversation with Nkrumah, with Nyerere. Someone like William Arthur Lewis came and became Nkrumah's economic advisor. So that 60 years later, we are sitting here with important developments. In 2008, the AU declared the diaspora the sixth region of Africa. In 2021, there was an Africa-Caribbean Economic Summit. But 60 years ago or today, the agenda hasn't changed. The top item is economic development. And that is what we will be engaging today. So let me speak briefly or introduce briefly who we have or we hoped to have for the former heads of states. I recognize Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the former head of state of Nigeria. I see His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn Boshe. We are supposed to have, I'm trying to find His Most Honorable Percival Noel James Patterson from Jamaica. I see my former president, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo. We have His Excellency Mohamedou Issoufou from Niger. And we have His Excellency Macky Sall from Senegal. In terms of the sitting heads of states or their representatives, I believe we have Malawi, we have the representative of Malawi, we have the representative, which is the vice president of Tanzania, we have the prime minister of Bahamas, we have the prime minister of Grenada, and we have the rep for Rwanda. I hope I am not missing. This is the list that I was given. So apologies if I have missed anyone. So a few housekeeping rules and we will start. I have three broad questions. The same questions, the three go to the former heads of state, and then three broad questions will go to the sitting heads of states or their representatives. When I ask a question to the former heads of states, they will all answer it. And then I'll go to the sitting heads of states. It will be a different question. Three questions each. For the former heads of states, the focus would be how they found finance for development. The second is how they managed debt. The third is how they went about the capitalization of development banks or multilateral institutions. Those are the three. And I believe I did share it with them ahead of time. For the sitting heads of states or their representatives, also three questions, and each gets to answer the same question. Again, it's a conversation. Feel free to build off what your colleagues say. The first would be their outlook on the global political economy as it is now. The second would be how they break out and rise from this fractured context today that we see. And I'll provide a little introduction for each question. And then the third, we'll look at the African Continental Free Trade Area and how we can build trade and investment flows between our regions and within our regions. If we have time, and I doubt that, there will be a common question to all of you about the currency we should trade in as we look at what is happening to the dollar and other international currencies on the global economy. So that is our agenda. So let me start with the former heads of states. If they can speak briefly, and a mic will be brought to you. So if you signal, the mic will be brought. We have two mics. If they can speak to financing development, how they raised development finance. On the flip side of that is debt. Some found debt, which made it challenging to raise money. Some raised money, which got them into debt. So they can speak about these two. You can start with either debt or you can start with raising finance for development. So that's the first question to the former presidents. And if you signal, I have Marie and I have Mark, they will bring you a mic. And if it is in French, I have Marie who can translate. So if we can see from any, can you please bring the mic to Chief Obasanjo, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Prof. Just to be very clear, we have the sitting president of Malawi and the president of Gabon also here with us. Okay. His Excellency Lazarus McCarthy Chakwera and His Excellency Bryce Oniku Ngwema, who will be joining us later. They are here. But let me go to Baba.
Okay.
Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I probably will say that when I took over as chief executive of Nigeria in 1999, I will not go the way they say it. They talk of empty purse. Mine was below empty purse. Because empty purse means that there's nothing in the pocket. Mine was I inherited a debt service of $3.5 billion every year. And I had a little bit less than that in the purse, in the reserve. So, and yet we had to carry out development. So the first thing is, what can we do to stop the empty purse and start filling up the purse? So of course, I will come back to that later. I have to go for debt relief at all costs. It took almost 5 years to achieve that, in fact, 6 years almost, but it was achieved. So that made me to be able to save $3.5 billion a year for debt relief. And when I was paying $3.5 billion every year for debt relief, the quantum of debt was not going down. It was not going down because of interest rate and what they call penalties. When you don't pay in time, they penalize you. And then when anything happens, they penalize you. So you're now getting debt upon debt. Now, but what did I do? Or what did we do? One, we had to stop waste. And that is very important. There's a lot of waste in government. And if you look hard, you will see where the waste is. And you cannot remove waste completely, but you can drastically reduce waste. And we did drastically reduce waste. The next is corruption. Oh, they give corruption all sorts of names. Whatever name they give corruption, corruption is corruption. And corruption is a strange bedfellow with development. Corruption and development don't go together. Don't deceive yourself. Whichever way you go about it, corruption is inimical to development. And we found that out. So the first bill I sent to the National Assembly is the bill to stop corruption and punish corruption. Now that bill stayed in National Assembly for 18 months. And the members of National Assembly watered the bill down. They said to me that if they have passed the bill the way I sent it, most of them will be in jail after they have left. After they have left the National Assembly. Now, so there's reduction of waste, there's substantially reducing corruption, and mobilization of resources. There are resources internally that can be mobilized if only attention is paid to it and is carried out well. That is on what we do. And of course, there's also mobilization of resources from outside. The outside resources are there. And I will put it this way: money to develop or fund to develop Africa is out there, internally and externally. It's how to get that fund mobilized internally, stop corruption and waste, unnecessary luxury, a good policy, solid policy, and then incentivize money from outside.
Yes.
Let it come in, make sure it stays in, and make sure it does what it's meant to do.
Thank you.
Now, let me just end on the note.
Thank you. Yes.
Talking about corruption. there was a situation when I was doing the debt relief. And I said, look, bring for me, let me see what are these debt that we are paying for. How do we import them? Where are they from? And there's a case like this. A state, part of the debt that we had to pay for, a state borrowed $10 million for donkey carpet manufacturing. Donkey. They drew up the money completely. They had a commission video report. The land was not cleared. The land was not cleared. When I saw this, I said I wouldn't pay. Then they showed me the small print where it says, whatever the money, once the money has been signed and the instruction has been given by the borrower for uh, deployment of the money, then the responsibility is that of the borrower to pay. So I had to pay the money that was not even, did not come to a project that it was meant to come to. And that is the sort of thing that we suffer. We had to make sure that we stop that. Then we will have money to do what we need to do for development.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have been instructed that we have a hard stop at 12. We still do?
Yes, I think so. 12 o'clock, is it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, former President Obasanjo's words actually echoed what Professor Sachs was saying about there's no shortage of capital, he said. There's a shortage of attitude and strategy to tap it.
Indeed. So please give the mic to His Excellency.
Thank you very much, moderator. When I was in office, we mobilized our finances mainly from domestic sources. As you all know, we have policy banks, Ethiopian Development Bank and the Ethiopian Commercial Bank, which are all state-owned banks. And that helped us a lot by generating savings in Ethiopia. I think that was the main reason we were able to finance the mega dam you all know, which is the Renaissance Dam of Ethiopia from domestic sources, which is around $5 billion US. Second, our rating by the time was B plus. So we were able to generate $1 billion US to build 14 industrial parks in Ethiopia, which is an exemplary. Now AFREXIMBANK is emulating and continuing on supporting African nations. And I think this is investing in productive sector is one of the key. We are not borrowing money for consumption. We are borrowing money for productive sector development. That was the thing. And we went to the East, and China has supported us a lot in infrastructure development in Ethiopia. You know that private sector cannot be competitive if you don't have proper infrastructure in place. And we were able to invest in a railway project that goes from Addis Ababa to Djibouti, which is 800 kilometers of railway, electrified railway, a green railway project that was supported by China Exim Bank. So we try to diversify our sources of finance when I was in office, and it continued on. Of course, it has genesis not only in my term but before me. My predecessor was one of the icons, African icon leader who championed for this to happen. By the way, I still believe that we championed for BRICS formation. Obasanjo is here, President Obasanjo is, I'm sorry, Baba. You, President Mbeki, Prime Minister Meles, and President Bouteflika, you four of you are the basis for BRICS formation. It's not from outside. So I think we need to diversify our sources, even in the future, going to the east, as Professor Sachs was saying, we have to utilize all sources of financing. So the debt issue is still a problem because the ratings, even though we got B+, but nonetheless, that has been declining from time to time. So we need to have rating institutions that are African-based, understanding Africa properly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If we could go to His Excellency Macky Sall, and then from there we'll go to Most Honorable Patterson of Jamaica. So Macky Sall.
Former
Pas
president of
qu'il ait
Senegal.
besoin, que nous ayons besoin de traduire la question qui a été posée, Monsieur le Président Macky Sall.
Thank you very much. I will speak in French. Je voudrais d'abord remercier AFREXIMBANK pour cette assemblée annuelle et féliciter le président Orama pour le remarquable travail qu'il a mené à la tête de l'institution. Je salue les chefs d'État ici présents ainsi que les anciens chefs d'État et je voudrais distinguer le président Olusegun Obasanjo, notre doyen, en le saluant. Je salue tous les autres. Alors la question qui est posée est une question pertinente. Arrivé à la tête du Sénégal, naturellement, comme dans la plupart de nos pays, nous avons des situations difficiles. Mais ce qui compte en économie et dans les finances, c'est d'abord la confiance que le pays inspire et le leader par rapport au marché et par rapport aux partenaires. Cela m'a permis très rapidement de mobiliser assez de ressources pour financer tout le programme économique que j'avais conçu, qui s'appelait le Plan Sénégal émergent. Sur une décennie, nous avons mobilisé plus de 3 fois les ressources antérieurement mobilisées. Cela se traduit naturellement par une modernisation de l'infrastructure du pays sur le plan de l'infrastructure routière, autoroutière, sur le triplement des capacités en électricité. Au moment où je partais, le pays était exportateur d'énergie électrique. Cela aussi grâce au secteur privé qui a cru et qui a financé dans la production électrique indépendante. Alors, tout cela, bien sûr, a été fait avec des contraintes, puisque l'Afrique, en réalité, évolue dans un environnement contraint et la dette, elle revient avec un fardeau, puisque les mécanismes aujourd'hui qui sont en marche ne permettent pas aux pays africains de s'endetter dans des conditions optimales. Ça, c'est une donnée qui est réelle et que nous devons enlever avec, naturellement, nos partenaires. La semaine prochaine se tiendra à Séville la réunion sur le financement du développement. J'ai lancé un appel de l'endettement et même parfois beaucoup plus cher, utilisant nos ressources domestiques. Pour cela, pour davantage mobiliser l'épargne, contrainte pour doit permettre à nos administrations privées africaines, AFREXIMBANK, Banque africaine de développement, la BOAD, African Finance, ainsi que les autres organismes d'en faire des soins à nos remerciements.
Okay, so we will go next, the longest serving Prime Minister of Jamaica. So we heard just now from the former president of Senegal, and before him, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Mariam Desalegn Poshe. So,
good morning.
Good morning.
I'm mindful that some corruption